Good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending this morning's Active Communities EAP. It's nice to see we're pretty much nearly a full house, so thank you everyone for attending. First item of the agenda is Chair's announcements. There's nothing from me, and I'm sure. Oh, yes. We are live streamed, so just remember everybody that everyone can hear what you say, and we are open to the public, so just think about it. Right. Second item, apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
Yes, I have apologies from Councillor Shacklock.
Thank you. Could you please use your microphone? Sorry. Thank you.
And Russell Roberts, I'm looking after him. You'll all be deafened if I use this.
Oh, bless you. Thank you very much, Paul. Are there any members' declarations of interest? Nope, lovely, thank you. Minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of April 2023. I wasn't at this meeting, so if there are anybody wants to make any comments, then please do, and I'm sure my co-chair Helen will can address it, but it doesn't look like anybody's got any issues with that. So do we propose the minutes? I'm happy. Do you want to propose the minutes, Helen? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, King. All in favour of the minutes then, please. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Right, so on to the substantive items on the agenda. Item number 5 is the tourism strategy. So this is something that we've been developing now for some considerable time. It comes under my portfolio, sport, leisure, culture and tourism. And I'm delighted to welcome Kerry Pennell, who's the AD for Communities and Leisure, Jack Pishorn, who is our strategic lead for culture, tourism and heritage, and Richard Dickinson from Tomorrow Tourism, who were the organisation who are contracted to do the baseline study and the overall tourism strategy, and that is in conjunction with West North Hants Council. Because obviously tourism has no boundaries, so we are working very closely with our neighbours in the west for the whole of Northamptonshire. So without, as they say, further ado, I'm going to pass over to Jack Pishorn, who's going to take us through the presentation and follow up with any questions. And following Jack, I think, Richard, you're going to come in and give us some finer detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Back in 2022, both North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire economy departments commissioned a tourism-related baseline data report that gathered key statistics on the current performance of the Northamptonshire tourism economy. It was important for us to start at this stage as it gave us a good level of understanding of the assets of which our industry depends so highly upon, including the quality of our visitor attractions, the number of accommodation options our visitors have, what our overall retail and hospitality offer is, an understanding of our transport links and accessibility, and the area we have with our entertainment, events and sport offerings. Coming into 2023 and following this report, we had key information that outlined our county's strengths, but more importantly, the challenges, opportunities and areas for focus within the local sector, including the sad fact that our domestic tourism performance has fallen by over 30% in the last 10 years, whilst all our neighbouring counties all continue to grow back following the pandemic. This identified decline further supported the need for both councils to revisit how we are marketing Northamptonshire as a destination to attract footfall and income, as well as increase overall dwell time. We also wanted to gain a focus on attracting investment for industry infrastructure and review how we are developing a local trained and upskilled workforce to support the sector's poor employment and retention rates. Following the creation of our new Culture, Tourism and Heritage Service at North Northamptonshire Council, we have been busy developing a 10-year strategy for Northamptonshire, led by both of our executive members for the North and West, Councillor Howe and Councillor Lister, and working closely with our colleagues at West Northamptonshire Council, key stakeholders and the industry itself, including hotel and attraction operators, transport providers, inbound and outbound visitors, and our local destination marketing organisations. We've also been working closely with Visit England, who in 2021 released their review and action plan into destination management organisations across England. Within our draft strategy development, it has become evident that it will be a key priority for both the North and the West to work with Visit England to create a new Northamptonshire Local Visitor Economy Partnership, who will work hand in hand with the industry and our councils to deliver a long-term strategy to provide a unified voice on behalf of the industry and grow our tourism economy. Both councils will play an instrumental role in getting this organisation off the ground, which will then be passported to the industry through a new governance structure. Being the manager of one of the largest visitor attractions within the county, the Chester House Estate, it has been evident that over the last couple of years, a new organisation and strategy is desperately needed, with support from both councils and the wider industry to provide this new service, ensuring collaboration, bigger and new ways of thinking, and a clear and coherent smart action plan to ensure we can attract people to this county who will support our spend per head and stay longer. And of course, this won't just impact the tourism economy, but will impact the the Northamptonshire economy as a whole. To ensure we are working with the best people on our strategy development, we've commissioned industry experts Tomorrow Tourism, led by Richard Dickinson, who's kindly here with me today. Tomorrow's Tourism have much experience in developing economy master plans, including that of Visit Gloucestershire and the Peak District. So, Chair, with your permission, I'll hand over to Richard to present the research, audit, consultation and strategy work. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Yes.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm delighted to be here, and as Jack said, we've been working for almost a year now on this interesting task of how Northamptonshire should best go forward to develop its tourism industry. And the perhaps I can have the first slide, please. What I'm doing today is I'm going to just give you some context of the work that we've done, and then look at the elements of work in more detail, namely consumer research, looking at the assets you have in the county, looking at how we've consulted on this particular piece of work, and then what has emerged in terms of the strategy. And I think you've got the handouts here. And I just wanted to identify in this slide that there's some really hidden gems in Northamptonshire, and indeed Northamptonshire, which people don't know about. And that's a big piece of this work has revealed a lack of awareness from lots of people around the country to the great assets you have. Next slide, please. Another piece of context is the national strategy, which Visit England is developing, and that sees an opportunity for Northamptonshire to fit into a framework which is about more coherent county-level structures to help develop tourism, to bring the jobs and the economic benefits to the county that it deserves. Next slide, please. This is first of all the bad news, if you like, the context from your perspective. You're the red line. Now, you don't want to be the red line because you had a very interesting couple of years, very good couple of years early in the last decade, and then it's declined since then, and there's various reasons for that. But the fact is that this strategy is needed when you look at your peers. If you look at your peers, blue is Buckinghamshire, which has stayed roughly the same over that period. Green is Cambridgeshire, which has done a lot better. So Cambridgeshire has, as Jack has said, grown 12%. You've dropped, unfortunately, 16%, which means there's a big gap. And if you'd grown the same as Cambridgeshire has over that period, you would have created about 660 more jobs. So that's quite important from the perspective of young people, from people in the Northamptonshire economy, and giving them opportunities, which I'm sure is key part of your brief. Next slide, please. On the economic context, you know this as well as I do, it's tough out there in terms of spending. It's tough in terms of all those things that are happening externally to the UK, which are affecting the economy. But it does mean that people are being much more careful with their money, as you know, and they're cutting back on big-ticket items. Next slide, please. I mean, the domestic tourism context is actually very buoyant for us and for Northamptonshire, which is good because it means that as people perhaps defray large ticket overseas tourist opportunities, they're actually staying at home more. And that's seen in that top bar chart around the looking at the domestic overnight stays, which is growing, and that's against COVID, so it's up 15% in terms of COVID. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of where you are in terms of the size and value of the Northants economy. 560 accommodation establishments, 180 odd visitor attractions, spending of around 500 million a year, 31,000 jobs across the visitor economy. It might be in bars and restaurants, it might be in cafes, it might be in hotels, it might be in visitor attractions. And so 4,500 businesses in the economy, and the majority of those are clearly small and micro businesses, which are important from the perspective of the community. Next. Oh, you've got that slide there, thank you. So let me move on to the consumer research. Next slide, please. And this just is illustrating the sample size. We talked to 1,000 people around the UK, which is statistically pretty robust. Most of those people were from outside of Northamptonshire. About 150 were in Northamptonshire. We talked to residents as well as people from outside. And next slide, please. The core challenges that we found really is about awareness, about an understanding of what Northamptonshire has to offer. This is the word cloud relating to that. You'll see that people, the countryside features, Silverstone features, but the biggest word is nothing, and that's partly because there's an awareness job to do to help people understand the great opportunities that you have here, the great assets, the countryside, the small towns, the larger towns where there's lots to do. So I think that's a sort of spontaneous word cloud. If you go to the next slide, please, still that follows through. Most attractions, there's a level of awareness for some, which is shown in the green bars at the top there, and that's talking about the particular places. So Corby actually gets quite a lot of awareness from people. So does the main town, Northamptonshire and Kettering. The others less so. And in terms of attractions along the bottom, you'll see there's quite a lack of awareness with many of the attractions. Next slide, please. And this is sort of the triggers and barriers to visiting. What we'd say these are sort of rather passive, because those with knowledge speak very positively about Northamptonshire, which is actually a plus point and is good news. But generally, there's a lack of knowledge, there's a lack of understanding of what there is to do and see, and that is reflected in some of those comments which you've got in front of you as well as on the screen. And those are all verbatim comments which people have illustrated, sort of an understanding of what there is to do. But most of them are around things like, well, there's no centre parks, there's no sort of, this is Wicksteed Park, but there's no major sort of accommodation staying attraction for leisure visitors in the way that there is in other counties. And so that's an important bit of background for the basis of the strategy. Next slide, please. And this is borne out with a comparison between North and West, where there's very little consumer awareness of any differences in the North and the West, and that's the bar chart you see on the right. And I think you as a council and the West have been absolutely right to join forces and to connect up on the tourism piece. And this is the slide that illustrates why that is such a good thing to do. And I think we'll come on to those advantages a little bit more later on. Next slide, please. So you're not alone. It's not all bad news. It's actually, from a point of view of your consumers and potential visitors to the county, most of the reaction from those visitors is about lack. It's not negative. It's just showing lack of awareness. We tracked also as part of this study what people think of Derbyshire, what people think of Gloucestershire and Buckinghamshire in the same sort of context. And actually there are more negatives if you look at other counties. So you're starting from quite a good place in terms of the consumer perceptions of the county. Buckinghamshire, for example, is seen as very expensive, and that puts people off. And there are other things that, Gloucestershire is seen as difficult to get to, whereas you're fantastically easy to get to, which is a real advantage. Next slide, please. So what makes Northamptonshire a great place to visit? Well, countryside, villages, history. It's understated, it's hidden. There are lots of surprising things going on that people don't necessarily know about. And that gives you a good hook. And I think some of the history and heritage, the historic houses you've got, the sites of notable battles, the richness of the ecclesiastical architecture in those 111 churches you've got, very important from the perspective of some of the niche markets. People love going to see battlefields and so forth. So that's also important. Let me move on now to the next slide, which is the asset audit, and the next one after that, please. This gives you an idea of the range of the... We use this slide in a sort of, for the consumer research, just to give them an understanding of the variety of things going on. And if I can move to the next slide, please. That gives you an understanding of some of the main attractions. This is the list which shows by asset class. So we're talking here, the table looks at Northamptonshire's assets in terms of the different categories, so whether that's accommodation, festivals and events, whether it's pubs, bars and nightclubs. We count all those up and then we can compare against other places. In general terms, both North and West have a really good selection of assets. North is a little bit more in terms of retail, in terms of visitor attractions, you over-index, you're higher proportionally than the West. The West has more sort of accommodation, as you'd think so, in relation to some of the road network there. And if I can have the next slide, please. This is where the awareness piece really connects up to the assets. You see Silverstone as the blue dot to the right on the yellow chart there. Well, that's people's high awareness of Silverstone and high desire to come and see events there. You've got a lot of different attractions shown in the blue box there that do not have that sort of awareness, and that's what we have to build on in terms of the strategy. Next slide, please. So this shows the serviced accommodation. Now, the serviced accommodation in the both West and North is probably relatively less than other counties. So you haven't got enough accommodation. Now, why that's important is because accommodation gives you staying visitors that spend more, and that gives more employment. And I think relatively against other counties, you've got fewer hotels, and you've got fewer of the hotels that really are going to drive impact. You've got quite a lot of budget hotels. They tend not to drive as much economic impact because their headquarters are not necessarily in Northamptonshire, and they have other issues. I think the places like Fawsley Hall, for example, that will bring in lots of international visitors. They stay longer, they spend more, so that's quite important as a sort of part of the strategy, and we've built that in. But quality is a bit low compared to others. So the chart at the bottom there shows that black line. You don't really want to be have any of that black line in terms of the quality of accommodation. And the red isn't great either, and so that's a sort of wake-up call. So, and some of that is about regeneration, and you've got some fantastic new hotels in Corby which are really nice, and quite a lot of the old stock particularly in Northampton, I think, has now been, regenerated, changed into other uses. There's new hotels coming on and opportunities there. So that's the hotels. Go on to the attractions, please, the next slide. This shows the results of a survey of visitor attractions, which you see the range in the heat map across the two unitaries is superb. Because of your central location, you have lots of visitor attractions. They are particularly concerned, as you would expect them to be, around the economic context at the moment. Getting staff is very important, so we've built into the strategy a new way of building a whole local community of people who could come into the tourism and accommodation workforce. That is absolutely critical. They also see wider government issues as constraints, taxation changes. Planning, as you know, is always an issue, but I'll come back to that in a moment. But from the point of view of positives, they're seeing a big positive on staycations, the domestic tourism side. And I think that generally, yes, consumer confidence is low, but it is rising, and the visitor attractions in Northamptonshire will benefit from that over the summer and into next year. Could I have the next slide, please? This shows where you are in quality, and this time it's not like accommodation, it's actually good news. For your quality of visitor attractions is very high. Here we're benchmarking you against Derbyshire. And Derbyshire have a few more, not that many more visitor attractions, but their quality is lower. This is using TripAdvisor reviews to assess that. But that's very good news, and that really shows that there's a very authentic and high quality offer across the two unitaries for visitor attractions. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the market review. Next slide again, don't need that one. This is using mobile phone data, looking at what this map is showing is where people live when they visit, in this case, Chester House, and when they come, and when they and from how far they travel. And it's quite interesting because you've got a very, very local market. There's lots of opportunities for engaging with your local communities in what they do in their leisure time for the benefit of the visitor economy businesses and for their benefit. So there's lots of great plans for the Blue Way and the Green Ways around here, and that can connect to obviously improving health benefits, improving mental health, all that stuff for local communities. And I think there's an awful lot of opportunity for the visitor attractions to work collectively to get the to offer good deals for local visitors across Northamptonshire. I mean, in Chester House's case, you've got a gap, you've got a sort of hole in the summer as people go away on perhaps to Spain or whatever. But it's actually pretty, it's pretty good numbers, and you get a very clear view of the sort of extent of visitation from nearby, and then also how far that is dragging people into who are interested from South Yorkshire, from East Anglia, and certainly from London and the South East. So that's quite a good map. If I can move on to the next one. The next one is Wicksteed Park, and that shows that's more of a visitor attraction, so it shows a different sort of dynamic in terms of time of day and in terms of visits, similar in terms of visits by month, and then also more pronounced visits across the weekend, as you would expect from a visitor attraction. And again, quite a large catchment area for Wicksteed, pretty well-known, respected, family-based visitor attraction, which is driving significant economic value to North Northamptonshire. And of course, these people come and then they spend money in different ways. They have meals and out and so forth. Even if they're day visitors, it's affecting and changing the economy. And the great thing about tourism is that there's a huge local benefit to people injecting money into local communities, which is why it's so important. It's not like buying a fridge or a washing machine where you buy something and all the money leaks out of the economy. You know, it's direct benefit for the people who live here, whether that's jobs or income. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about overseas visitors. This analysis also gives the opportunity to understand who's coming. And your visitor profile, generally speaking, overseas visitors to the UK are in slightly different order, but generally US, Germany, France, Italy. And certainly you've got that sort of profile. You've got more French and US visitors visiting North and West Northamptonshire than you would expect. That's why they're in green. And you've got fewer of the other types, with Ireland particularly low. Now, you'd expect that because Irish visitors will visit the west coast and tend to visit the west of England for familial and other reasons. So that's a pretty good picture. But I think from a perspective of the strategy, we're saying don't be too concerned about the international market. People will enjoy it, they'll come, but you don't have to, you can get a partnership with Visit Britain to actually do that work for you and concentrate on the domestic market. And likewise, the next slide, please. The local opportunity is the one we think is also very important. You know, we know that almost 2/3 of visitors come from the county, you know, so we have to, with the strategy, recognise that and also start the marketing and the promotions to get more staying visitors from elsewhere in the county. At the moment, you've only got around 20%, a fifth of your market coming from either the outside the county or outside the main counties around you. Now that 20% can be improved dramatically with the right sort of positioning and marketing. Let me come on to consultation now, if we could, and go to the next slide, please. This is what your local, how you see Northampton. This is your local community, what they think of the county. And they know a lot more about it, as you would expect, than many of your potential visitors. Again, the countryside features the parks, the beautiful spaces, the heritage, the history, the villages. We did detect, and we picked up in presentations at round tables with professional colleagues and our colleagues from the tourism industry, that there needs to be a greater civic pride in the county, and that some of the communities feel you know, slightly cynical about it, and that's actually quite important to address. And you will have, I know, plans for the brand and the wider sort of perceptions of the county. So the sort of pride in living here, you know, needs to come through in the messaging around for visitors, and that's very important. In terms of the next slide, please, the product. This is what people thought. I.e., this is again your residents and what they thought of what was key. They recognised the good transport routes, the countryside and the small towns, as we've said, the visitor attractions, and perhaps less importance on things like retail, and also less importance on sort of business events and conferencing, which is interesting because the slide that I didn't go into in detail earlier says that you've got a very good strength in the people who come to do business here and meet here because you're so central. So there are opportunities for the business tourism market, as well as the leisure market, because business tourists, they come, they stay, they spend money. They normally can spend more money than many leisure tourists, so they're quite important to get right. But generally speaking, it wasn't seen to be a priority by the residents of Northamptonshire. Next slide, please. So what does the evidence tell us? This is summing up where we got to with all that research. At the heart of the challenge is a simple lack of knowledge of what the area has to offer. There's no tangible difference between west and north in that sense. And a very clear proposition is needed to start to win back and attract people from across the country. And so it's important there's a clear message of what there is to see and do there. In terms of the sort of issues arising from that, next slide please, you've got blurred borders, so people aren't necessarily sure you know, where you start and end, and that's not at all a criticism, it's normal. And I think working with counties around you would help as well, because Buckinghamshire has some interesting visitor attractions like, you know, the sort of various museums of, and so forth at the Second World War. Bletchley, thank you. Thank you, Kerry. And Bletchley's not far from you, you know, and you can use that as a way of attracting people in and then bringing them up into the county to do other things. So those blurred borders are an issue. And then there's this idea of how do you get more people coming in from further afield, which is important. Next slide, please. So in terms of looking at your assets, and we know already that the visitor attractions are very important. So the meetings and conference sector is underdeveloped relative to your neighbours, so that could help later on. Very good at strong attractions base. Strong on sport, you've got great rugby, cricket, now I understand football. So that's actually good news, because those guys will come in and they'll be very loyal, and they will come and repeat visits, and they will want to come back to see their teams. And certainly from, I know some of my friends have great allegiance to the rugby team here and travel from Suffolk. So, you know, it does work. And those can be connected up better with other attractions in the area. Food and drink is really good. You've got a really strong emerging offer in some of the pubs and restaurants, which is good. And then the cultural events side also can be built on. In terms of issues, I think, as I've mentioned, let's have another slide, please. The offer is lower quality in terms of the accommodation offer, which you'd like. So I think that something has to be looked at there in terms of particularly larger service hotels. Recruitment issues recruitment needs tackling. That's not just your problem. It's a national problem, but we've got some ideas how you could work with the universities and work with others around you to help that. And then the retail offer is, you know, Rushton Lakes gives you an idea of what the potential is. The Rushton Lakes has been fantastic for this area. Probably still some work to do on some of the town centres, but they are emerging and coming up. So onward, in terms of the surveys, what do we summarise from the responses? You've got a very diverse visitor economy, but it lacks standout reasons to visit. Highly ranked to the villages and countryside, the attractions and the local food and drink. Some of the issues and things to sort through are about marketing and promotion, about becoming more accessible and sustainable, which connects with larger government agendas, which will bring funding. And last and probably most important, improved collaboration is critical in this area. And we can come back to that when I just tell you a little bit about the strategy in a moment. Next slide, please. The issues really arising, you know, are things like keep the investment going. I mean, the Blue Way is a unique and irreplaceable bit of heritage. It's also an important visitor offer, especially when you look at the way in which people are now visiting. They want experiences, they want things to do. The millennials and younger people are much more about treading lightly and having experiences which you know, can get them back to nature, can get them into somewhere they haven't been before, and which are unique. And so some of that accommodation offer can be built on things like glamping and camping, which is low impact and doesn't have a massive planning issues, but actually can give you and can help build small businesses that offer really good, authentic services and products to our visitors. So that's the sort of strengths there in terms of what might be looked at from terms of weaknesses, and this is much more in the strategy document, much more detailed. But I think you need to work on customer service and look at also at the sort of planning frameworks and how they can be built on and developed. And that just on planning. The next slide, please. I mean, you've had a very good net effect on hotel rooms. This is analysing hotels across since 2016 across the two areas. North has done slightly better than West in terms of the numbers. So you'll see probably 850 new hotel rooms, a loss of 110, net gain of 720. Average size of hotels have been in the north a bit higher than in the west, so 441, an annual growth rate of 2.6%. Now that's quite good, and I think it would be helpful for the council to be a bit more proactive on what sort of accommodation it wants, where it wants it, and go out and help investors and developers to understand the area better. Because your location will always mean that people will want to come to look at opportunities. But I think you could possibly be a bit more proactive about making that happen, and that's in the strategy, because there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of advantages. You've got unprecedented catchment. You've got the best catchment in the country, basically, for the number of people within 2 hours drive time. So there is a lot of opportunity. You need to bring the accommodation numbers up further. This is a good start, this shows, and it's certainly a positive sort of picture from the perspective of your planning teams. Next slide, please. So let me move on to the strategy and the priorities, and the next slide after this is a view of businesses and stakeholders. So we went out to all those businesses and stakeholders and asked them, from your perspective, what's most important. And we see here improving marketing and promotion as top. Now, you'd expect that, wouldn't you, with all that work on the awareness and looking at how that might be addressed. Marketing and promotion is seen to be one of the key areas that you really need to get a grip of. Again, as I said, improving collaboration across the public and private sectors. There's a real willingness amongst the sector to work together. They need your leadership to help them with that, because they won't do it on their own. So there needs to be some kind of glue connector, if you like, and I suggest that it's you and your colleagues in the West that can help that happen. And it's not easy, because they, at the moment, perceive a competition amongst themselves where they should actually perceive a collaboration which will build the whole pie and make it work better. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of that, and they're right in terms of that collaboration point. And then you have a range of other issues in the green there around becoming more accessible. That's a good market opportunity. It's certainly the right thing to do. And also looking at the whole issue of the environment and how that can be connected. And your environment is actually a brilliant resource to practice some of that net zero activity and how that could work better. So that's good news. The only one we would change, I think, there on our professional advice would be to put the level of accommodation up the graph. And I think part of the reason why it's at the bottom is slightly because of who we were asking these questions to. There were the group of stakeholders in the visitor economy, not necessarily accommodation providers themselves. And we just put that one a little bit further up. In terms of vision, let me move on to the next slide. Really, I think I mentioned pride earlier. That's the first thing to start thinking about. Building a greater sense of pride across the county and driving economic growth by inspiring people to visit Northamptonshire. How do you do that? Through collaboration and creative work across the entire visitor economy to provide visitors with compelling reasons to visit, stay, and deliver great times to each and every one. And what do you want from their experiences? Well, visitors will leave wishing they'd stayed longer and vowing to return. I think and this went through a number of different workshops. So we came up with a vision which was turned out to be very inadequate, but luckily there were lots of good people around the table over the last couple of months actually advising on it. So this is a collective of the industry and a bunch of dedicated stakeholders across the Northamptonshire community have come up with this. It's not our vision, and much better because of it. In terms of the goals, here's the next slide. Really, we see four goals. One is around driving visits and value, which will help the whole economic piece. One is about great people. So your people being an authentic welcome and offering peerless service to your visitors. You've got a great academic and institutional framework to help this, because both in the college and the university, you've got some really top flight tourism, leisure and visitor economy courses. So it can actually come from within, and it can help you provide new jobs for motivated young people who, if they're good and if they're bright, can go far in the tourism industry. A lot of people say, oh, it's flipping hamburger jobs. It's not the right sort of tech. It's not tech enough. But actually, as an industry, if you're motivated and bright, you can go far very quickly in this industry, and that's shown throughout. So great people, better business. There was a you've got a bunch of very professional businesses, but the businesses themselves need help. They need support, particularly smaller ones, to have the time and space to think strategically, to think environmentally, to think about how best to attract more visitors and to work together better. And that can be something which you can help with. And the other one is inspirational places. And inspirational places, which you'll have on your agendas already, and that's a way of connecting the tourism and visitor economy to that wider regeneration piece where plans are well advanced. But inspirational places and how that works for visitors is quite important to consider. And we are saying to you, why don't you think about something that puts you more on the map, whether it's an Angel in the North, whether it's a new attraction, whether it's a standout hotel, whether it's something that will just bring and lift the sort of the whole to the outside world, and that's worth thinking about, I think. Next slide, please. Oh, that's the wrong. No, keep going. Sorry, that was an error. Can you go next slide after this? Apologies, because it was just a slide on the. This slide is more detailed, but the objectives to get to your goals of more visitors and value, great people, inspirational places, and better business, we think you need four things, and that's collaboration, partnership marketing, planning for the future, and focusing on quality and performance. And if you do these four things, that will enable real gains and real progress to be made. So collaboration at the heart of this strategy, very important in relation to connecting the industry up. And that goes back to the point that Jack was making earlier about the national framework. We have these new opportunities called local visitor economic partnerships, which should be a vehicle in which to get people to collaborate better. But this isn't going to take, it's not going to be done in a month. It's going to take some time to get right and in order to make it work well across the piece and get the synergies going between different sets of operators, and both from the public and private sector after our. Partnership marketing, yes, the local is important, but we'd stress the need for bringing more staying visitors in, and we like and think that your blue way and green ways and those sort of opportunities can really work well for a new type of visitor who loves this sort of authentic countryside and small villages. And I think there's got to be quite a significant campaign done over the next 2 or 3 years to put Northamptonshire on the map in a way that's quirky, that reflects you, that reflects your authentic offer that is surprising, and you can see a marketing agency having a really good time in working this up, because it's a very interesting proposition and opportunity for them. Planning, I think, as I've said, prioritise new accommodation, look at how planning policy more broadly can extend and help the development of the visitor economy, whether that's small B&Bs, whether it's food and drink, whether it's other places. I know we did a little analysis, and we checked the number of pubs with rooms in Northamptonshire versus the number of pubs with rooms in Derbyshire. And I think it's about 15% in Northamptonshire, it's about 40% in Derbyshire. So if you allow, and I've just had this conversation with colleagues in Buckinghamshire who are very concerned about giving pubs additional capacity in terms of rooms because of parking and other things. But actually it does help the economy massively, and it's often rooted in the small businesses in the community. And think about a standout opportunity around what else could help put Northamptonshire on the map. And then from the point of view of business, quality and professionalism has to go up. You're already doing this in terms of support to businesses in many different ways, I'm sure. But certainly a particular focus on the visitor economy will be helpful. Next slide, please. And this is the two axes of sustainability and accessibility. Accessibility, as I said, the accessible market is about a fifth of the total market in England. It's huge. Lots of people have disabilities which they don't necessarily reveal, and but you can make lives much easier if operators, if establishments are just aware of the types of issues that are important. And there are lots of ways of doing that. The most important is staff training, and you could become an exemplar of a really inclusive and accessible welcome across the county. That is something which no one really has done it, so yet properly. So that's an opportunity. And then looking at the sustainability question, we think you should tie yourself to the UN goals here. We've identified a number of those UN Sustainable Development Goals which relate to the visitor economy, and there they are sitting on that slide, in terms of things like good employment and growth of business and so forth. So that's important. Just in terms of actions, last slide, there's quite a lot in the plan around what sort of things you could do immediately to help those different goals. As I've said, prepare the ground for the marketing arrangements, make sure that the reposition and raise awareness of the offer and the place, build capacity around to be able to respond to the workforce challenge, and we've suggested that you do develop a partnership with your university colleagues, and they're very keen to help that process. And you will already have local skills plans that you're dealing with. So try and build the visitor economy into those existing plans as well. And then look particularly at the business sector and how you support those guys, and look long term at the increasing the understanding of the potential of the visitor economy across both unitaries. Try to get other parts of the council to understand this great opportunity and this economic driver that exists and that you have, which is all to play for and has great potential. So I think that's the next slide, please. I think that's my piece. I'm sorry if I've gone on too long, but question and answer. We have actually got the opportunity also to take your questions and answers and build them into the plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Jack, did you want to finish? Or everybody's happy and had enough to say. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, really comprehensive. Thank you very much for bringing that report to us. I think you'll agree there's a lot of information there, and it does show that we have some real really good opportunities here to try and improve our visitor economy. So, but I'll move to questions now. I see Councillor Chris Hines, Smith Hines is, thank you, Chris. Got a hand up, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of the questions that I was going to put came further along in your presentation, so thank you very much. The points I was going to make was that a lot of our visitor attractions, such as Wickseed Park, Triangular Lodge, Rockingham Castle, they're day trip sites. So developing information that could make them connected to other activities. So don't just come for the day, come for 2 or 3 days and you know, do this day 1, do that day 2, so on. Would be really good. The blurriness of the lines. I was watching ITV News a couple of days ago, and Silverstone was reported as being in Buckinghamshire. So, you know, it goes the other way. I did want to say something about international visitors, and you mentioned Irish people tend to go to the west of England for familial reasons. Do we have any opportunity to connect up to sites such as Ancestry or Find a Grave, so that we can say, well, you know, I know I've got American cousins that have come over and they found it very difficult to find my nana's grave because it's so difficult to access the location using, oftentimes the phone lines just not answered and stuff at the crematorium to where the grave sites are. So is there something that we can do in that respect, or possibly sort of do a historic churchyard map? So, you know, not everyone who came from Kettering is buried in London Road Cemetery, for example.
Thank you, Chrissy. Yeah, so I'm more than happy to sort of touch on a few of the points that you raised. You are right. A lot of the attractions that we have at the moment really predominantly offer sort of day visits. And I think that was recognised quite early on when we were doing part of this strategy. And as you know, we've opened the tourism hub at Rushden Lakes, which is specifically there to be able to go along, see what the attractions are, and use the interactive screens and everything to plan your trip. So there'll be a website coming along as well that's being developed, so people can actually go on and plan their stay. But I think one of the key points that was highlighted was this lack of accommodation, and I think that's something that we all need to address, especially in planning terms, to ensure that, you know, we as an authority, and hopefully with the West as well, encourage operators to come to our county as a whole. But from our perspective on planning policy, that's something we should look at, glamping, camping and all those things, as was stated. That will in turn then give the opportunity for people not just to come along for a day, but to stay and play, so to speak, for a greater period of time, therefore boosting our economy. So you're absolutely right, and that is something that we've already looked at. But please, if you haven't been to the tourist hub in Rushden Lakes, please do go along. There's an awful lot to see down there, that the interactive screens and everything, and we'd love for you to be able to promote that as well through your residents in your area. The idea of the finding the graves thing, that's fantastic. I mean, we can take all of this information and build it into things that we're doing. I was very lucky to be invited along with Jack to go to Leicester University on Wednesday evening to go, and we work in partnership with them anyway at Chester House Estate. And Professor Sarah Scott there was putting on a big heritage exhibition, and actually we came away with fantastic ideas how they're promoting Leicester, all of the material that they've got. So, you know, walking trails, heritage trails, all those things. So we came away with an awful lot of information, but you're absolutely right, that would be really, really useful to do. So Thank you for your comments. Did you want to come back, Chris?
Yes, please, if I may. Just wanted to point out that a couple of years ago, Wicksteed Park almost went bankrupt, and we now have the issue with KLV. So what are we doing to support local attractions that are independent as such?
Yes, well, obviously, let's start with Wicksteed Park. Yes, I mean, through COVID and everything, as you know, we were fully supportive with the business grants, and we even allowed them to have their waste removed, because they're open predominantly to the public with no charge as well. You could walk round, and of course that generated some issues for them. They were having to cut the grounds and still litter pick and everything while COVID was still on. So we as a council supported them in doing that and emptying their bins and things for free. But obviously these are private enterprises, and as and when they come to us for support, that's something that we look at. And you mentioned KLV, which is obviously a very tricky situation. There are contractual obligations there that have to be dealt with, and obviously we can't say too much at the moment because we're in negotiations with them. But yes, this is something that we will look at, is whatever support that we can offer through the sector. So yeah, we are looking at every avenue, I can assure you. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Helen Harrison.
Thank you. So I was just looking at the heat maps of where people come from to come to Chester House and to Wicksteed. And then thinking about the connections that we already have. So, you know, again, you were talking about people from Ireland tend to come to the West Coast. Well, we have obviously massive connections from Corby to Scotland. And I wondered if there's a potential there to use the connections that already exist to try to encourage people who would presumably be coming to visit family in Corby and around the area to you know, come and enjoy some of our attractions and you know, the wider heritage that we have here in Northamptonshire. Just talking about the hotel and accommodation offer, I think we've known for a long time that we need to attract more hotels, more accommodation and better quality. And I think I'm right when I say that when Rushden Lakes was first proposed, part of that proposal was for a hotel. And the developers came along and presented a whole lot of market information to basically say there was no need for a hotel, and convinced the planning authority to be able to change the plans for Rushden Lakes. So again, you know, I think it's really good for us to have as much data as possible to show that we do need that accommodation, because in that case we lost the opportunity for what would have probably been a really good hotel, I hope, and it never materialised. So as an authority, I think we need to be much stronger on knowing what the need is so that we can push back on that kind of thing. And then one final thing, in terms of the tourism hub at Rushden Lakes, which is brilliant. I think, and I'm sure we are already doing this, but the online offer, so that people, you don't actually have to turn up at Rushden Lakes to be able to access all that information and see it. The stronger that is, the better, because of course most people search online when they want to determine where they're going to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Yes, you're absolutely right. And the connection here in Corby with the people from Scotland is really strong. So that is something that we will you know, take on board and look at. We've got a lovely heritage centre in Corby that we are looking to perhaps even open even longer hours than it is. So, but that's all part of the restructure that we're doing within the culture, heritage and tourism portfolio, so that we can provide more access to all of these facilities. You're absolutely right about the Rushden Lakes Hotel, and not only that one, there was the one at Worth Park in Raunds as well that we had planning permission for a hotel there too, but both of those were, the viability issue came up again, and that is why, you know, we weren't able to insist on keeping those sort of things. But this strategy is, as you said quite rightly, the proof to say that we actually need those type of hotels. And we all know that evidence is key, really, and having strategic documents like this that prove in all areas of the council that this is what we need and this is the direction we need to go in are absolutely valuable in taking that forward. And as I said, rightly based on what you said to Helen about information for people outside, the website is in the final stages of development, and we're just sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's on that, and we will be launching it very soon. So yes, and there'll be a big promotion around that too. So thank you for your comments. Yes. So King, over to you. Thank you.
Again, just to reiterate, very, very comprehensive, bit of research and strategy. It's absolutely fantastic. Got a few points here, Helen. The first thing that sort of stood out to me from one of that word was shoes. Shoes came up, I think, twice or three times. And, from going around the country, kids and everything else, going on different breaks, when we talk about Northamptonshire, people do mention shoe, the home of the shoemakers. I wonder how we can major on that in terms of any plans or strategies so we can support businesses. And another one of my questions is, you mentioned, Richard, about proactive in making things happen from the council perspective, and which practical ways can we support businesses, not in terms of financials, but in terms of promoting their products and services around some of the local history that we have within North Northamptonshire and West actually as well. What practical ways can we actually do that? And I think the procedure as well in businesses getting in contact with the council needs to be an easy stream. They need to be able to have a contact. They can call and say, right, we got this will be very good for the area. How can we push this, particularly if it's in line with our local strategy? But I think this whole shoemaker history is. We should be majoring on that. Another point was around foreign direct investment. I know that's a government thing, but if you look at, for example, Cambridgeshire, they've got restaurant chains like Wendy's and food chains going there. I don't see much of that in Northamptonshire. Again, how are they able to get that in their area? Is there something that we can do as a council to get more restaurant chains and food chains like that into our own area? Hotels and accommodation, Helen touched on this, absolutely required. But then, of course, you've got this whole thing now about the illegal immigration and the government utilising those hotels. How do we encourage local entrepreneurs, and it's been touched on already, to set up more hotels and Airbnb, bed and breakfast and things like that? But that was just a side point, but it has been touched on already. Kendal mint cake and Cornish pasty. People know me. I went to Cornwall for 4 days. You go there, it's all about Cornish pasty. It's very delicious, and everyone knows those things. Again, this goes in supporting businesses and pushing Northamptonshire or Northamptonshire as a whole. How do we major on a product that can emphasise our brand and bring people here like they go to Cornwall for the Cornish pasty? What else have I got here? That's mainly it. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you, that was quite extensive. I was just scribbling away there. Yes, so you're right, the shoe industry has been really, really big in Northamptonshire. And obviously we have a lovely shoe museum in Northampton. And I must say, I've been round it, it's fantastic. So if you ever get the opportunity with children and everything, it's really fascinating. But yes, it's about guiding people to those attractions. It's about promoting other areas, maybe doing satellite type of events so that we can, in and around all of our other facilities, so that we can keep promoting that side of the business. And as for still local businesses that are still producing those type of things, working with them to ensure that we are promoting them as well, and that boosts their sales and everything as well. The contact with the council, you're right, we've through this process, obviously, we've gained an awful lot of contact details with a lot of the sector and the industry. So that's really useful, and we will obviously maintain that connection as we go forward, because the strategy is just the start of things. Moving forward, we've got to create a board, and that will be run and organised by the sector, by the industry. So, you know, we will, you know, we are just the start of things, because we have the ability to be, and the skills to be able to start the process, but we aren't the end product. The end product will be run by the sector, and I think that's really important for everybody to understand, that, you know, we will be assisting, but we won't actually be managing and running it. The sector need to take control of it because they're the experts. You talk about big chain restaurants. I think it's very difficult, isn't it? We have Rushton Lakes, which is fabulous, but we've got purpose-built premises there that can hold big chain organisations, and as long as we keep footfall, we will be able to encourage those type of organisations to come. And I think that's probably another planning issue as well. We need to look at how we develop so that we can encourage. I know here in Corby we've got some. It's very unfortunate that we've had one or two close, but you know, we need to start encouraging those large chains to come.
Five Guys. We have got Five Guys. Sorry, yes.
In Rushton Lakes, yeah, you are right on what you said about immigration and having an impact on our hotels and everything, because it's extremely difficult to lose those sort of facilities. But at the moment we are where we are, and we've got to find a way around dealing with that. I think that's going to be the hardest thing, and encourage maybe the government not to put them in our hotels. So, but I hope that answered some of your questions. So thank you very much. I now have David Watts. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, that was a really helpful presentation. So a couple of comments from me, which haven't been picked up on. So I've tried in every council that I've worked in to promote the Purple Pound, which is effectively the 250 billion a year that is spent by disabled people in their households, and recognising that as a potential where if you can make your area accessible, if you can make it somewhere that welcomes people who have disabilities, then you have a ready audience. You have a group of people that will come back because they recognise that you're doing things to make your area accessible for them. So I think that's really important. When you think about some of the challenges that we've got in our rural areas, so particularly our farming communities, the opportunity to maybe diversify and include things like glamping sites, in those areas, I think that's a real opportunity, but we have to open that dialogue with that group of business people that we have within our area. I think this has been really useful for this EAP. We have people like Kerry, Yvonne, myself and Susan and Shelley are all part of our corporate leadership network, which is effectively your directors and your assistant directors that are responsible for everything that we deliver in the authority. It includes our planning, it includes our estates teams, it includes things like children's services. So I think it'd be really important that we collectively heard this presentation together, because I think there's a real opportunity for everyone to start thinking about, well, what are the opportunities within our own directorates to help establish and deliver against some of this. So I think if nothing else, Kerry, we probably do need to bring this to a corporate leadership network for a bit of a discussion and thinking about how we move forward in that sense. So yeah, I think those are probably the main points. I love the idea of niche festivals and things like that as well. They don't have to be huge. They don't have to be the ones which, attract 60, 70,000 people in. But if you establish a routine of things which are happening on a regular basis that maybe do celebrate things like our boot and shoe industry, or some of the other, the countryside things which are happening in the area, but then attract in perhaps some of our younger populations around music and food and craft and art as well. I think there's some real opportunities there. But do we know what they are at the moment? Probably not. But and I think there's an order to things that we do here. So we've talked about big chains coming in and then closing. But actually, if people, the most likely people that are going to use those on a regular basis are visitors that haven't got facilities to cook and they want to go out and eat. Yes, our ready population may do that, but they may only do that once or twice a month. So it is about how you attract your business visitors. It is about how you attract people that are coming to the area to visit Wicksteed Park, to stop overnight and want to eat out. So thinking about, you know, getting the right sort of accommodation and having your ducks lined up in the right way so that you're not developing one without a clear idea on how you're going to sustain the others by bringing things on board in the right time. And I guess I didn't get that from the strategy about, you know, what's the order, how do you do that in a way which is sustainable so that people then take a chance on investing in the local area.
Thank you, David. Yes, I think I'll let Richard talk about that part of the strategy. But if first I'll just touch on the accessibility issue is something that I'm really keen on as well. We as council have already had funding to invest in the changing rooms, which is fantastic. I know we've got at Stannick Lakes and there's one here at the core at the council offices here. Let's not forget we're one of the flattest counties in the country, so accessibility is fantastic here, really.
Said one of the fattest cats.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, and then I realised you said flattest.
Did I must put my teeth back in, yeah. So yes, the flattest. So actually, accessibility is fantastic here because you can literally walk for miles, and it cannot be too onerous on anybody with disabilities. So that is something that with the team I've been working on and saying that we need to really focus on that. That's an actual USP for us. So really, you know, this is something we need to focus on as well. And as the glamping camping, you know, we've got to encourage this. So and you mentioned about having engagement sessions. I've already got plans to have a full member engagement session about this, because really everybody needs to buy into what we're trying to achieve here. And of course, we certainly do it with the corporate leadership team. So thank you, David. But Richard, if I could just pass back to you on David's point about the in connection with the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you for all the comments, which are very helpful. And things like ancestral tourism can be developed and be very successful, and we'll build that in as it's important for the sort of history and heritage sector in the economy. I think in terms of the order of the strategy, and yes, you're right. It's not yet. The action plan sets out in high-level terms the likely cost and length of how long it might take to deliver the different aspects. I think one of the key issues for both unitaries is about funding and about how you pump prime, if you like, the next steps. I mean, certainly, having done this work, and you've got lots of positive comments and views from the industry, but it does need to be continued in terms of there needs to be dynamic and a direction shown to the industry, and I think I would hazard that that's your, at this moment, that's you and your colleagues in the West job to help that happen, because without it there'll be you haven't had much in place. Yes, there's been great stuff over the last couple of years in terms of specific initiatives, but for the county as a whole, that's why you saw the graph early on. It hasn't performed as well as it should have done because there haven't been the resources applied over time. You know.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, David, I think you wanted to come back.
I just wanted to mention things. So when we're thinking about funding opportunities, and bear with me on this. So you know, we do have things like UK Shared Prosperity Funds, Levelling Up Funds, which are about trying to shift the emphasis of a whole area in that sense. So I think there is a bit of an opportunity about saying, well, if we're missing out on creating 600 jobs as a minimum, just to bring us up to where other similar counties are, then there are opportunities around how we can invest in certain things which will drive our economy to a much better extent, support communities by creating more employment opportunities, better quality opportunities as well, which are different and diversify from things like our sort of distribution emphasis that we have within the economy at the moment. So I think there are some real opportunities, but we have to be on the front foot with that. So how do we package up bids for things like Levelling Up Funds, UK Shared Prosperity Funds, that say this is about, shifting a whole area in making it more attractive, bringing, significant outside investment into the local area where the money stops in the local economy. So I think that's a real opportunity, but that's why, sharing this presentation with, for example, our economic development team and with the team that helped pull together some of those bids, I think will be, really helpful moving forward.
Yes, thank you, David. You're absolutely right. We're not one to shy from trying to find those pots of money, are we, Jack? But one thing that is quite important and is key to all of this is this creation of this, what we call the LVEP, Local Visitor Economy Partnership. And if we can go for that status, that in turn will be the channel through which we can gain funding from the visitor sector, from the government. So that is really quite important, that when we go for this LVEP status, it allows us then to go for greater pots of funding to enable us to build on what we're trying to achieve with this strategy. So yeah, thank you. I think, John, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. And forgive me if I'm all over the place with questions, because I just received this yesterday and didn't get an opportunity to go through it. Firstly, great piece of work, in depth, appreciated. It's really got a lot of information there. On your context, just remind me why we stopped at 2019. I know we've had a few difficult years, but why is it 2019? It is disappointing that we're 30% down, but we're in an economic crisis, haven't we? We have been for a few years. So we're trying to do something now during one of the worst economic times than ever. That's not an excuse not to do it. In fact, it's more a reason why we should be doing it. And when you mentioned consultation, I don't think 1,000 people is a lot of people given the size of the area, but, you are the experts, I'm far from it. Did we speak to Love Corby and what was their feedback specifically? Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we want to grow on it, don't we? And enlarge it, support it and do more. We mentioned the Scottish earlier. As you can tell, that's where I was from originally. But this is my town, my county, and I absolutely love it. It's my home. When my relations come down here, it's about local stuff. It's about going to the theatre, the cinema. It's about going down to our excellent boating lake. I can only talk about Corby because that's where I live and have done for a long time. But that's not to say we don't go outside of that, don't we? Because it's important that joint partnership with our other counties, down to Huntington, to the Sue that's down there, going to the park in Kettering, etc. So we've got to try and encourage more of that and work more with that. Because if we're sending people there, they'll be sending people here. So I absolutely agree we've got to do more about crossing borders. The other difficulty about transport, I really do hope that this administration doesn't get tied up with just Chester House. It's already spent 12 to 15 million when we look at the figures, so we need to widen that across the whole of North Northamptonshire and Northamptonshire as a whole. But what we do need to bring people in is trains from the north, and we've been banging on about this in Corby for some time. We can go to London and people can come up here pretty quick, but bringing people down from the north is a lot harder. So we really need that electric train line and the west, but we need to chase that if we want to build that economy for people coming in. And when we talk about showing what we have some of the best golf courses around in this Shire, and in Corby and all over the Shire. We have one of the biggest fishing places in just near Oundle, where people come from all over the country to spend weeks there. Never see that advertised anywhere. So we've got so much in this little part of our country that we all love that we need to do more about. But it was an excellent piece of work in it, and I look forward to what I would have liked to have seen, Chair, is, and I know you say it's not all about cost and money, etc., but it would be nice to see something about costings going forward and how we try and bring that money together to try and be successful in the future. And absolutely, Chair, and just as an offset, and I'm sure most people know this, we probably have one of the biggest green festivals every year, a couple of miles just down the road there. Most people in Corby don't know about that and don't go to it, and yet they come from everywhere to go to it. So we're not promoting that within ourselves, never mind out there. So there's still a good bit of work to do, and I know that myself and our group will be right behind you trying to promote as much as possible.
Thank you. Councillor McGee, yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, just for your information, we have engaged with pretty much everyone that we could find within the sector, so Love Corby was definitely involved. And you're right about working with our neighbouring councils as well. I mean, if you take the Greenway, a strategy that we're working on, a programme that we're working on at the moment, which although some people probably know parts of the Greenway exist and it's predominantly in the south, we're looking at the whole of Northamptonshire to cover as the Greenway. But part of that, it goes to Peterborough, it goes to Northampton, it will go to Market Harborough. So we're looking at joining all the dots. I think that's the most important thing here. We have sections of Greenway that exist already, and we have 4 area leads who are now looking at how we can, as I say, join all the dots and create this wonderful Greenway, which will encourage people not only to get out and about and use their legs and walk and enjoy the countryside, but it can take them to destinations, and we can encourage people to do things that way. But also we're looking at the Blue Way, utilising our rivers and things as a mode of transport as well. So there's a lot in the pipeline that's already going on behind the scenes to try and promote everything that we're doing. But you're absolutely right, promotion is key here, and part of this strategy and working with and setting up this new LVEP will enable us to focus our attentions on how that works and how we can promote everything that we have within the county. So yeah, and as for costings, yes, we haven't costed it yet. We're in this process, and a paper will be coming forward very shortly once we understand all the ramifications of what creating this LVEP is and what Visit England require us to do. Because we are applying for this status, we have to meet the criteria, and at that moment we haven't sort of drilled down to exactly what that criteria is, because we're actually quite trailblazers in this. There are already destination management organisations that existed previously that have sort of morphed into this LVEP status. But this is something new for Northamptonshire, and we want to get in there first and get promoting Northamptonshire as a visitor destination from the outset. So it's quite new, and we're still trying to work on what sort of the figures are really. So as soon as we have them, you'll know about it. And I do apologise that you didn't get the slides till yesterday. We were working furiously to get them produced. So thank you very much for your comments. So Richard, yes, if you wanted to come back, thank you.
Just a point about 2019 figures. That was essentially COVID stopped all the tourism surveys. The government have been rather lax. They've got another survey which they've started, which is of course not comparable to the last one, so it's not very helpful, but that's what's happened. Thank you.
Just follow up, what about the train line? Are we going to work as a council with outside partners to try and ensure that we can get that in the future?
I'm sure that that's something that we'll all be working with our partners to try and encourage all modes of transport to bring people into our county. Yes, so thank you, John, for that. Thank you. Are there any further questions from anybody?
Just myself.
Oh yes, thank you.
And just you mentioned LVEP. It's the first time I've heard of it, but I kind of understand from what you've said. What's the process for getting that status? I know you say you don't know everything yet, but what's the process?
Okay, Jack, did you want to come in? I mean, I can touch on it, but you know the finite detail. If you're happy to come in and just explain it, thank you.
It's a good question. We're working closely with Visit England at the moment to do the groundwork for the LVEP, so understanding how we resource it, how we fund it, and how we link it to the strategy that we're creating at the moment. We've got to put an expression of interest in, which we want to do over the next couple of months once the strategy has been signed off. Following the expression of interest, we need to look at a governance model. We need to look at how we're going to fund the LVEP, so creating some kind of business plan. So we look at the things David mentioned, shared prosperity money levelling up, but then also ways how we can generate income through the LVEP as well, so such as paid marketing, advertising, that kind of thing. As soon as we're through to that stage, we put the full application in, and we're hoping to have an LVEP established towards the end of this year.
Thank you, everyone. I think we've had a very comprehensive conversation about that, and I really thank you all for your input. And yeah, let's just see that it's a lot of work that's gone into this.
Ask if we get an update in about a year's time to see where we are.
Sorry, John, could you repeat?
So that we don't lose track of it. Is there a chance of having an update in about a year's time to say exactly
absolutely.
what's been successful
Thank you.
or not?
Yes, definitely. We will be bringing it back to this EAP. Thank you very much for that. Okay, right. Thank you. If you'll excuse Kerry, Kerry's staying, Richard and Jack, they've got other meetings to attend, but thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Really appreciated. Right, I'm going to now hand over chairing to Councillor Helen Harrison because we're moving on to her section. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Helen. So the next part of the meeting is the showcase. If you remember, we were talking about showcasing the different service areas in order that the panel, the group, understands what responsibilities lie where, what sort of things are coming forward, and what things you might want to look at in the future. So today we've got public health. So we have Susan, Shirley, Abdu, Mike, and Kate. I'm just looking at the time. We've got just 33 minutes left of the meeting. So I think I'm not quite sure exactly what you've got planned, but if perhaps about 5 minutes each, so there's enough time for panel members to be able to ask any pertinent questions. I'll hand over to you, Susan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harrison. Yeah, it's great to have this opportunity to showcase public health. Just a bit of background about the department. So we officially sort of formed the North Public Health Department in October 22, so about 7 months ago, so we're quite a new department. We are predominantly funded from a public health ring-fence grant given by the Department of Health to the tune of about 18.5 million for this year. And we do have a few other funding streams. And within that grant, there are conditions about how we spend it. So what you're hearing today is predominantly is the sort of reality of how we spend the public health grant and the programs around that. The department has about 63 people currently in it. The people that you've got on your screen today are basically my top team. So we've got Shirley, who's Assistant Director, and we've got 3 consultants, Mike, Abdu, and Kate. So I think hopefully we've got a slide pack, have we? Have we got a slide? Right. Okay. I think, given the shortage of time, I think what we'll do is, well, if we can figure out how to get the slides up, that's fine. But if I just hand over to each of my ADs and consultants, just to give 5 minutes on their areas of responsibility and the sorts of things that they cover.
Susan, the slide pack, is it where we've got the picture of each person a little bit, because we've already been given that.
We can use that. We did do some additional slides, but if you can look at the slides you've got in front of you for reference, and we'll talk off that if that's okay. Okay, brilliant. So if I can start on my left, actually, with Shirley.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Chair. Just checking that my microphone was on. So, Whistle Stop Tour. I think you got some original documents with an outline of my areas of work. there's some supplementary slides which I hope were shared with you yesterday. If not, I will make sure they're shared with you after this meeting. I just wanted to build a little bit on that, give you a flavour of my professional background. My professional background is environmental health, and that led me into, as you see now, public health via various other jobs at other local authorities, including working in housing, and a range of services: environmental health, emergency planning, waste, community safety, bereavement services, licensing, warden services, supporting people, leading on a care and repair service. So I have been through quite a range of local authority services. But in public health, my role is about leading a small team. So I have a small team of project officers looking at areas in post-disaggregation that need a little bit of support and focus. So 3 project managers, a project support officer and a systems officer. And going forward, we'll be leading on the research and evaluation portfolio of work. I also matrix manage, so look after some of the activity around comms related to public health, business management, working with the business manager, Danny Adams, who, if any of you meet Danny, he is excellent. Very valuable member of staff. And really, any other relevant activity that Susan or anyone else feels needs a bit of attention or support. So I am a generalist, doing whatever is needed. But one of the things that's really exciting me is going forward, I will be leading on the research and evaluation portfolio. And given the discussion we've just heard about the need for evidence and being able to make decisions based on evidence, I think that's a fantastic opportunity. And we will build on some of the existing work, but make it much more coherent and link in with the ICS research strategy, but make sure there is a good research strategy for public health and the wider North Northants Council, so that we build our evidence based on our local need. And I'm really excited about that. In the meantime, we are running small projects, so we've bid for some money. One of my project officers is leading on that, the European Research Project, which is a 1-year funded project through the Clinical Research Network of the East Midlands, and in collaboration with the University of Northampton. We have recruited someone from the Eastern European community to connect those links and hopefully train local researchers and get that two-way flow of health information, because it's a section of our population we don't actually have a lot of information on. That's just an illustration of what we could do at scale going forward. Another area of focus that I have picked up is the governance, so looking at the financial framework, helping unpick our finances from the disaggregation process, making sure that we are on track and we are managing our budgets, including our public health reserves, to pump prime innovative projects that will make a transformation to the activities of the council. Looking at workforce development, which Danny is leading on and doing an excellent job, and we will be taking that forward to make sure to build the next generation of public health professionals, to grow our own, to build on the quality of staff, and to make sure there's an offer that encourages people to come to North Northamptonshire Council and builds our reputation as the employer of choice in public health and generally. I've listed some things that we've already done, but I'm not going to go through those because I'm conscious of time, and I know my colleagues will want to have the microphone for a bit. The last slide that I have pulled together just gives you a little bit of a flavour of some of the inequalities activity that we're lending some support to as part of the recovery activity post-pandemic. So, for example, the prevention subgroup of the ICS is chaired by one of the consultants in public health, West, but I'm the deputy chair. And one of my, the reason why I volunteered for that was because I am really keen that we get the wider determinants of health front and centre of everyone's agenda. And that's a fantastic opportunity for us, I think, and we'll wash through a lot of council activity. And if we can we can get that framework right, it will be to the benefit of residents. So I'm really, really pleased that I've kind of manoeuvred myself into that position. I'm not sure if everyone else is, but we'll see. One of the early projects I undertook was supporting Ali Gilbert in the setting up of the place-based activity, but that is now transferred to my very able colleagues in community services, and that's being delivered now through them. There are a number of other projects that my team are supporting, so that we are launching a trauma-informed practice project, which is based in the health improvement team of public health, which you'll hear a little bit more about. But at the moment, that team is probably under-resourced, so we are helping them set that up, but we will then hand it over and move on to the next project. Another one we are doing is asset-based community development training, which we will be training public health officers in, but then offering out further iterations to colleagues across the council to try to embed that approach. The Eastern European Research Project I've spoken to. One of my officers is also supporting the setup of the Combating Drugs Partnership until recruitment takes place to that. So it's that sort of boost support. And also similarly supporting the Health and Wellbeing Board while recruitment takes place. My team will then move on to other activities as staff come in and those activities become embedded, and that's the beauty of the team. We pick up, we deliver something, we are the bridging to a more permanent solution, and we move on to something else. It's challenging at times, but I think we all really enjoy it. So that is a really, really fast cover of my items, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Shirley. That was brilliant and really quick. Do I have any questions, or do we want to leave them till everybody's? Okay, go for it, King.
Sorry, just one question. I wanted to be really quick. You said seeking to influence to a left shift. Is that sort of John McGee's party? I'm not sure what you mean.
No, left shift. So left shift is the prevention. So moving to the wider determinants as opposed to addressing health issues. So addressing the causes of the causes.
Thank you. Yeah. Cheers.
Chair, I don't know why people perceive me as left. I'm just slightly left.
Thanks, Shirley. So I don't know who we're moving on to next, is it?
Thank you. So if we could, we got any? If we could move up, Mike, you're next on the screen, I think. Do you want to take us through yours?
Yep. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Yep. Brilliant. I also did a set of slides very similar to Shirley, so they'll be in your packs. So, please take your time, and have a read of that. So again, I'll just do a little bit of background similar to Shirley, just to introduce myself. So I came into public health as a mature student. Went to university after spending a period in the army. Went and did a health community studies degree, and then did a master's around health promotion, health education, and then became really, really interested in public health. And I was admitted onto the Public Health Register in August 22. So I'm a recently newly qualified consultant in public health. But with that, I've got over 20 years experience of working across a variety of public health roles, working my way up from a practitioner up to more specialised and generous roles. Key areas that I've worked on: tobacco control, mental health, learning disability, children's services, and older people, oral health and food poverty. Some of those things you've touched on today, and I was one of the regional leads for oral health in Greater Manchester, and also mental wellbeing at Greater Manchester, working across 10 local authorities. So hopefully you can see that I've come to Northamptonshire with some experience, and I've been really, really excited about working in Northamptonshire, and I've applied for one of the permanent roles, and I'm really, really committed to Northants. Aside from that as well, I've got, as I said, I've got a military background. I've also been in the reserves for over 28 years as well, and I'm an active RAF reservist as well. So I'm really, really interested in veterans' health and wellbeing as well. Key areas for me at the moment is I lead on health protection, wider health protection, and some addictions. These also then link across the corporate directorates, and also working quite closely again with West Northants as well. And again, lots of partnership working that comes with those portfolios. So at the moment, we've established a team in health protection. So that's really been the first focus of my work. So we've established a health protection team. So we've managed to get 2 permanent posts, a principal health protection and a practitioner health protection. And then we've established a infection prevention and control team as well. And that's just become established. That's just become operational in the last week. As well, within the team, we've got a smoking cessation team with a tobacco control manager, and then we've got 3 advisors and some admin support around that. The other thing that we've done, particularly around linking in with other services, so we've linked into regulatory services. So what we've done is we've just funded some very short-term posts to get the work up and running, really. And what we want to do is kind of map across regulatory services, what kind of work is going on that impacts on inequalities and public health, and also really interested in developing a commercial determinants of health, because obviously the private sector has an impact on people's well-being as well as the climate and the environment, really. And then some other work going on around indoor air quality around schools, and we hope to scope an air quality strategy as well. And then another piece of work that me and Susan are starting to look at is how we map some of the public health work and support economy in place as well. And that's another piece of work that we're going to scope. So really exciting opportunities around regulatory services and economy in place that we want to develop. So just touching back on health protection, just very quickly. Some of the emerging themes that are coming out of health protection and the strategic focus we want to work on is around sector-led improvement. So how we have a really strong, robust health protection team going forward. Measles as well. We were looking at working with the Integrated Care Board around measles eradication strategy. And also another piece of work where we want to scope out inequalities in immunisation as well to improve immunisation across the county. And cervical screening and women's health is another emerging theme that we're picking up, as well as being prepared for winter preparedness and the JNSA. So around wider health protection, we're starting to scope out some really early work around a public health approach to reducing serious violence, which really is about looking at the surveillance kind of and data, so we understand what's going on around serious violence and how we start to reduce that, identifying the risks and protective factors, and then think about how we develop interventions and evaluate those interventions, and how we would scale those up. So the first part of that at the moment, the police are leading on, and they're in the process of doing a JNSA on that at the moment. And then just quickly touching on addictions. This is around substance misuse, so around prevention, treatment and recovery services for both adults and children. And at the moment, we're just doing some modelling work and some scoping of actually what those services would look like in the future for 2026. Some of the key themes that are coming out at the moment is around complex children, and we're seeing small increases of children with complex need entering our substance misuse services. So we're working jointly with West Northants to look at pathways and bringing partners together to scope that work out, and think about how we do some preventative work and get children into the services at the right time. So very much around that early intervention. We've established a combating drug partnership for Northamptonshire. There's a strategic action plan that's been developed. I'm sitting on the data intelligence subgroup and co-chairing that, with an aspiration of very much of, yes, doing the outcome measures, but also being proactive and looking at how we use qualitative and quantitative data to start to develop interventions and evaluate interventions around substance misuse. Also very nicely links into the serious violence work as well, so we're hoping to start doing some joint work across that. And then we've got some early scoping work around tobacco control and gambling as well. That's very much at the scoping stage at the moment. So that is a very quick whistle-stop tour of the portfolio areas. And as I say, I'm really, really pleased to meet everybody and work with people in the future.
Thanks, Mike. That's brilliant. I think if it's okay with everybody, if we could have the other two presentations before we go on to questions, because otherwise I think we'll probably run out of time. Thanks.
Brilliant. Abdu, do you want to go next?
Yes, hi everybody. Very nice to meet you all. My name's Abdi Mohideen. I'm an interim public health consultant. Oh, that's good. The slides are there. I'll just go very quickly through this. So my background really is a public health consultant. I trained up in Scotland and then, like many Scots, moved down south, ended up in London, where I was there for about 20 years. I specialised there at King's College London, working with the local health authority at the time then, and then successor organisations after that. Mainly in Lambeth, that's sort of the Brixton way, and Southwark, that sort of Peckham, Dulwich type part of London. And then I've worked abroad as well, and also do some part-time work now with Northants. Next slide, please. So there's a small team of us in children's. We cover other areas you'll see in a moment, but most of our work is children's. So a mixed bunch of people there. We work very closely with our commissioning colleagues across children's services as well as other parts of the council and the system. And we have some interim support at the moment, given the workload. Next slide. So in terms of portfolio, most of the work is really around children. So that's maternity and early years, working with the local maternity and newborn system. Also healthy schools. We're doing a couple of joint strategic needs assessments at the moment, and then a lot of work around commissioning and contracting that's related to that. Safeguarding as well is a big bit of our work. Child death overview panel is perhaps the main bit we're doing at the moment. We're also doing a campaign in safer sleep and also supporting the neglect strategy. In terms of sexual health, that's covering all ages, not just children, it's all ages sexual health. There's a joint strategic needs assessment underway at the moment to support, again, the commissioning contracting. I'll say a bit more about that in the next slide. And then we also work in oral health, again, all ages, not just children, and also have some involvement in the adult learning service as well. So just on to the final slide. Thank you. So in terms of what we're planning next and the sort of strategic work and choices, well, the big one is around children, young people and the 0 to 19 contract. That's been extended for up to 2 years, and the needs assessment will inform that. Other bit of work we'd like to do is really improving the healthy lifestyles for pregnancy. We've got a number of issues that crop up in the child death panel work, and I think there's a lot more we could be doing antenatally, particularly within communities around that. We'd also like to do more around early years settings, particularly with our children's services. And we're also working on how can we improve our healthy schools offer too. Within this and also the adolescent age group, there's a lot we'd like to do around youth strategy. That's improving both the youth voice and representation, as well as an offer too around that, which appears to be a bit of an area for improvement locally. In terms of sexual health, there's a new contract to work on that's been extended for 2 years as well, and the needs assessment will inform that. We've set up a network. There was a sexual health network across the partnership a few years ago, but it sort of fell into abeyance. So we resuscitated that to get all the different stakeholders together. In terms of oral health, we'd like to do a strategy in the autumn. There are some contracts we think we can do some more work, change in the duty around NHS E and executive in terms of its commissioning responsibility. That's moving to the ICB, so we'd like to work with them locally to see what more we can do. And then finally, around safeguarding, it's not just continuing with this child death overview panel work. We'd like to strengthen that with a new coordinator and an electronic system, get a lot of the learning into practice across the system. And then we're working on a keeping babies safe strategy, of which the first part is the co-sleeping, and then it'll move on to other things like safe handling and safe space. So that's it. That's all from me. Just a very quick one too. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abdu. That was brilliantly quick. And just on to Kate.
Hello, folks. I don't think my slides made it, but there you go. I can just talk to and tell you a little bit about myself and what I'm doing, if that's okay with everybody. In background, I'm a medical consultant, so I'm a doctor, actually, a trained doctor, and I've been things like a DPH in the past. Like Abdul, I'm a contractor here. I'm working with you. I've also been a CEO in the third sector, so I've got a range of experience, I suppose. And actually, my CEO experience was in adult social care, which is even stranger, isn't it? So there you go. Everything seems to come together sometimes. I kind of lead quite a large portfolio at the moment, which is around the public health intelligence, which is the GSNA mostly, but other things, particularly developing the GSNA because we haven't got one at the moment. I also lead on the joint health and wellbeing strategies. Again, it's a very developmental thing because we're just starting it really. I lead on adults, health inequalities, and also health and work, which is a particular passion of mine because good work really does improve health and well-being, doesn't it? So we all know that. So that's my sort of area. I think other things I'd like to talk about is just go through some of the areas. The first one we started, of course, is the joint health and wellbeing strategy. Perhaps is the kind of foundation, really, piece of work, really, because everybody has to have a joint health and wellbeing strategy, every area. And it's really, really important. And it gives that kind of context, that kind of vision, that kind of what we want to do, really want to do to improve the health and well-being of our population. And usually attached to that is a group of quite a small group of priorities that will actually really punch through and really make a difference. And I think it endorses that kind of place approach. So definitely we're working quite closely with the LAPs and the CWFs because that's really, really important because we need to make sure it means something to local people. And I think that's really important. And also, of course, what it also does, the joint health and wellbeing strategy, is improve partnership working because we say these are some of the really high level things that we want to do. Talking a little bit more about that, what we've picked up a lot is actually the wider determinants, haven't we? Everybody's talking about, working upstream because we don't just want to control demand, we want to control need. We want to actually work to make people better. We don't want to wait till people get ill. So actually the purposeful focus for our new joint health and wellbeing strategy will be around that working upstream aspect, the health and work bit. We picked up things from the LAPs already, which they picked up children and young people, and they picked up public mental health, which is again working upstream around mental health issues. So hopefully we'll incorporate that. And I think we want to move away in the new strategy to go away from a deficit approach, more upstream approach, or we actually look at the causes of ill health. So that's very broadly a quick one about that. And we've already set up some groups to start to look at that. And I'm working with the North Place Board to look at how we could do it. And we also have a steering group around that. A second thing I'm doing is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, which is really, really important area. I mean, that's something that we really need to have. And in many ways, it does underpin everything that we do as well, because it's really a fundamental piece of work. And it's basically just a method for reviewing the health and well-being of a population. It's as simple as that. It sounds simple when you say it, doesn't it? But it's there to consider local populations' health and well-being now and in the future, and actually guide you councillors, you decision makers, to what would be a good decision for the local population. So there's no set format for it, and they've never given us anything like that. But that's good because it gives us the latitude and freedom to actually think about what do we want to do, what's important to Northamptonshire. So I think that's really good. And I think one of the important things it can do, as I said, it supports commissioning decisions. It would support decision making in general, service planning, and it also helps us move towards what are the real things we want to work on. And again, it should be underpinning all plans in the system, really. So it's a really important piece of work. Again, it's early days. We've just started that. We set sort of a joint health and we've set up a working group to look at that, and we're also feeding into hopefully into the place board around some of that work. But again, we've got our plan set up. We just need now to get on with it. And of course, always the problem is capacity. The capacity to do this, because we're using quite people like the public health intelligence team, which are obviously, that's a very scarce resource in any council, as we all know. Other things I'm working on at the moment, just to touch on that, I mentioned that I work also in adults, so I also have a small team that works in adults and things like that. And some of the things that team's looking at is health and work, recommissioning healthy behaviour services, and health checks. All very important stuff. I think to take them in order, the health and work one, why are we seeing that's really important? Well, because good work improves health and well-being, but not only does it do that, it improves productivity, competitiveness of local business, and sustainability of local business. So it's really, really important. And it's a clever one, work in health, because basically it extends outside the individual that's impacting on the worker into their family, because it addresses things like child poverty. So, it's a really, really important thing. And I think, what we're trying to do here is actually look at how we can work with business, because their people are out there. They are leaders in their communities too. And how can we actually support them, particularly the small and medium-sized enterprises, to think how can they promote their employee health? Because, there is a saying that says the wealth of businesses depend on the health of employees. And I think that's absolutely true. So we want to fundamentally take a view that works with local business. So we're kind of looking at things around a commercial option to do some of that work, and actually come up with a strategic approach, and actually support things like wealth building, local wealth building, which we think is really, really important. And again, we want to work with businesses, so we're starting to think about how do we work outside that and how do we work with them, and actually bring that together, so we're not doing something that's unusual. And in the past I've worked with Chamber of Commerce and LEPs to do this sort of work, so there's a lot of really good stuff we can do together. So that's one of this. Next one is recommissioning of integrated lifestyle services to improve outcomes. At the moment, it's early days. We're reviewing the current model with the aim of simplifying it, and also to achieve greater value for money and effectiveness for residents. Because there's different ways of achieving this. So we're going to look fundamentally at this. But our real question is, how can we improve the long-term health of the population through that healthy lifestyles approach? That, again, still working upstream, but slightly down from, if you like, wider determinants part. So, and that's going to require some consultation to actually get that right, because particularly with our local people and our stakeholders. So, because again, it needs a very joined up, integrated approach. The last bit I'm going to just touch on with you is the health checks programme. If people probably know it yourselves, it's a midlife screening for individuals aged 40 to 74, particularly those not on relevant disease registers currently. And that's aiming to reduce the risk of things like cardiovascular disease, such as stroke and heart disease. And actually, it's really important because cardiovascular disease is responsible for about 1 in 4 premature deaths. So actually, terribly important, and also it accounts for a significant gap in healthy life expectancy. And if we remember that healthy life expectancy is one of the missions of the Levelling Up programme, it's a really important one then. And again, that takes place mostly at the moment in general practice. I think another thing that's really important to remember about that is actually also can impact about health inequality. So we can work this and think about how do we do it better. And again, that's part of the work we do. The last thing I'm lead on is for my sins. I lead on health inequalities, and I'm working with West on that to think about how we can actually look at the plan, how we can, again, not make it something that's an add-on, but integral to everything we do. It's like a health in all policies sort of approach across the system. How do we make it so everyone, when they're thinking about health inequality, thinks, what is this policy going to do? How will it impact on health, well-being, and health inequality? So that's the kind of approach we're trying to take, and looking at some of the sort of Marmot ideas out there as well, because Marmot's obviously a key player in this whole agenda about health inequalities. That's all I wanted to say, and I hope I've done it really quickly, but I'm sorry if it's a bit long-winded. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. That's really helpful. It is almost 12 o'clock. So you all did really well to go through so quickly what you probably were expecting to have a little bit more time to talk about. But I think that has given members of the group a really good broad oversight of what public health is all about, and just the sheer breadth of services that we're going to be looking at and working on over the next few years. And I think we probably haven't really got time for a lot of questions, but we need to make sure that that presentation that we were going to see has got to everybody, so that we can have a good read of that and be able to then start to pick out things that we want to bring to future meetings, because that's really the point. It's so that you understand what the breadth of the services are, what things are being looked at, and what you as a panel really want to get involved in. So I think if that's okay, we'll leave that there, and thank you everyone for coming and presenting. You will get a chance definitely to talk about your areas in more depth at some point when we look at things that are going on in your patch. So thank you very much, and you may now all go. If we move on to the forward plan, you'll hopefully see that in your packs. You can see that we've looked ahead to the next meeting, which is presumably June, July, August. And if I just can whiz through to where it is, we've got a series of strategies that have been touched upon just now by Kate and by Shirley in particular. And so we've got the social, I'm just trying to remember, we've got the health and wellbeing strategy, as I can get there. We've got the I've lost it. Anyway, there's 3 strategies. Oh, there it is. Somebody has kindly put it up on the screen. You've got the wrong pack, Helen. You need to go on. You need to go on modern.gov, but you can't. So there you are. You see the sports and leisure strategy, the health and wellbeing strategy, and the adult social care strategy. So we're going to bring those 3 as a presentation and discussion to bring you in on. All of those are at different stages, but pretty early in their development. And then we're going to have the service presentation, which is going to be from Communities and Leisure next time. So that's what is coming forward at the next meeting. And then we agreed that we would look at, keep on the agenda, the terms of reference. So I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say about the terms of reference today. That is fine. That is great. I'm pleased that no one wants to say anything about the terms of reference, because I don't know about any of you, but Helen and I over here are absolutely freezing. We have got cold air blowing on us just continuously. So I'm really pleased that you don't want to say anything about the terms of reference. And agenda, is that it? Yes. So on that, unless anybody has anything else, David.
So just pointing you back to the forward plan, what you'll see is that we've got service presentations for the next 4 meetings coming as one of the agenda items, but we have space in October, December and February for 3 other substantive items. So hopefully the other pages in the document will give you a bit of a flavour. I know that 2 of them need populating, so we need to make sure that Kate's and Sam's are fully populated, but that will give you an idea about the areas of the different portfolios and give you a little bit of a think around, yes, we'd like some of these to come forward and fill those gaps that we've got in those later meetings, if that makes sense. But with the next meeting really focusing on strategies that we have in development.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. So if there's nothing else,